Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these episodes as you fall asleep, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Before you fall asleep, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new nightmare. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's welcome the Nightmare Igniter. Story 1. The first time I saw the patient in room 9, he asked me why the nurses had stopped aging. The second time, he asked why I had. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 32 when I started working nights as a medical records clerk at Apex Hospital in Western Pennsylvania. I had taken the job because my wife, Leah, was pregnant with our first child, and the night shift paid enough to cover the medical bills we were already accumulating. Apex was the oldest hospital in the county. Most of it had been renovated into bright corridors with polished floors and digital screens, but the eastern wing remained sealed behind fire doors. It had once housed long-term patients before a flood damaged the lower floors in 1987. My supervisor, Mrs. Bell, trained me during my first week. She was a narrow woman with silver hair, sharp glasses, and a voice that never rose above a whisper. Paper files from before 1990 are stored downstairs, she told me. You won't need them unless the system generates a legacy request. What's a legacy request? You'll recognize one. She handed me an old brass key. East Archive. Don't enter Ward E. Isn't it condemned? Yes. Then why would I enter it? Mrs. Bell studied me through her glasses. People get curious at night. The hospital changed after midnight. The smell of disinfectant became stronger. Fluorescent lights buzzed louder in empty hallways. Elevators opened without being called, and the ventilation system sometimes carried sounds that resembled coughing. The other night clerk was Marcus Hill, a nursing student with a constant supply of energy drinks and sarcastic comments. He pointed at the security monitor one night. There's your legacy request. A new record had appeared on my screen. Patient, Arthur Vale. Date admitted, March 14th, 1974. Status, in treatment. Room, E9. No discharge date. I refreshed the page. The file remained. Wardy has been closed for decades, I said. Marcus opened another can. Maybe Arthur hasn't heard. The system requested a paper chart confirmation. I used the brass key and took the elevator to the basement archive. The room smelled of wet cardboard and dust. Metal shelves filled the space from wall to wall, holding thousands of aging folders. Arthur Vale's chart was already lying on the central table. I had not touched it. The folder was thick, its cardboard softened by time. Inside were handwritten notes from different doctors. Patient remains responsive. Patient insists treatment is complete. Discharge postponed pending observation. The first note was dated 1974. The final one had been written that night. At 1:13 a.m. The ink was still wet. I called Marcus downstairs. He read the note twice. Who has access to this room? Mrs. Bell. You. Me. He touched the ink. It's fresh. A bell rang somewhere beyond the archive. One clear metallic note. Marcus looked toward the eastern wall. What's behind there? Ward E. We followed the sound through a storage corridor. At the end, we found a set of faded blue doors chained shut. The bell rang again from the other side. Then a man coughed. Marcus stepped closer. Hello. A weak voice answered. Is that the new orderly? We're hospital staff, I said. Who are you? A pause followed. Arthur Vale. The chain tightened against the handles as something pushed from inside. I'm ready to go home, he said. I called security. Officer Jim Navarro arrived 10 minutes later, irritated at being pulled away from the emergency entrance. He was broad, practical, and completely unimpressed by anything he could not write into a report. There's no patient wing behind these doors, he said. We heard someone. Pipes. The pipes know their own name? Jim removed the chain and tested the door. It opened. Beyond it stretched a dim hospital corridor. The wallpaper was yellowed, and the floor was covered with green linoleum. Old glass lamps glowed along the ceiling. The air smelled of iodine, mildew, and boiled vegetables. That shouldn't be here, Jim said. According to the building plans, the old ward had been demolished after the flood. We entered anyway. Our flashlights seemed weak against the darkness. Metal bed frames stood behind open doors. Blankets sagged as though bodies rested beneath them, but each bed was empty when we looked closer. At the nurse's station, a telephone began ringing. Marcus answered it. His face changed. He slowly handed the receiver to me. A woman was speaking. Room 9 requires evening medication. Who is this? Nurse Whitcomb. I glanced at the dusty station. A frame staff photograph hung on the wall. Nurse Eleanor Whitcomb, 1976. The woman in the picture had no face. The call ended. Jim told us to leave. As we turned back, wheels squeaked behind us. A medication cart rolled around the corner by itself. Small paper cups sat along the top. Each had a patient's name written on it. Arthur Vale, Marcus Hill, Jim Navarro, Daniel Mercer. My stomach tightened. Jim knocked the cart over. The cups scattered across the floor. From every empty room came the sound of patients sitting up. Bed springs groaned. Curtains shifted. Bare feet touched the linoleum. We ran. The corridor had lengthened. The blue doors were no longer visible. Instead, the hallway ended at room 9. The door stood open. An elderly man sat upright in bed. He was thin enough that his hospital gown hung like fabric from a wire frame. His skin was pale and waxy. A plastic identification band circled his wrist. Arthur Vale. He looked at me with clear gray eyes. You finally found my file, he said. How are you alive? He smiled without humor. They keep changing the word. What word? He pointed toward the chart clipped to the foot of his bed. Treatment. Someone had crossed it out and written observation. Observation had been crossed out and replaced with recovery. Then evaluation. Then isolation. Each word was written in a different decade's ink. As long as I'm being treated, Arthur said, I'm still a patient. Marcus stepped closer. Who keeps writing the notes? Arthur looked past us. The doctors. Figures stood behind the frosted glass wall of the room. White coats. Surgical masks. Motionless heads. Jim raised his flashlight. This ward is closed. One of the figures entered. The doctor's coat was stained yellow with age. His face appeared blurred, as though I were viewing it through moving water. A name badge identified him as Dr. Harrow. He opened Arthur's chart. Patient displays agitation, he said. Arthur began trembling. Please, don't let him add anything. Dr. Harrow wrote a new line. Discharge postponed due to violent behavior. Arthur screamed. His body jerked backward against the bed. Leather restraints appeared around his wrists, materializing as the pen moved. I grabbed the chart. The doctor turned toward me. His features shifted beneath his skin, forming several different faces before settling into none. Interference with treatment, he said. The other doctors entered. The room expanded around us. Beds unfolded from the walls. 3 new charts appeared at their feet. Our names were printed on them. Jim swung his flashlight at the nearest figure. It passed through the doctor's head, but Jim's arm came back covered in frost. The doctor wrote something. Jim collapsed. A hospital bracelet appeared around his wrist. Security officer experiencing delusions. Marcus dragged him toward the door. I held Arthur's chart. If I destroy this, does it end? Arthur's eyes filled with panic. It may end me. Is that what you want? He looked toward the doorway. Behind the doctors, the corridor had changed. A woman stood there holding the hand of a small boy. Both wore clothing from the 1970s. Arthur whispered, My wife. The woman did not smile. She looked exhausted. The boy had Arthur's gray eyes. You've been gone 50 years, she said. Arthur began crying. I was trying to get discharged. You never came home. Dr. Harrow reached for the chart. I tore the final page in half. The doctor screamed through every speaker in the ward. Lights burst overhead. Doors flew open along the corridor, revealing patients from different decades. Men in iron lung machines. Children in old wheelchairs. Women behind stained privacy curtains. All of them watched me. All of them wore identification bands. Marcus shouted, "Daniel, move." The doctors closed around us. I ran to the nurse's station with Arthur's chart and found the discharge stamp beside the telephone. It was old, heavy, and stained with red ink. Mrs. Bell stood on the other side of the desk. I had not seen her enter. She wore a nurse's uniform beneath her coat. The same uniform from the faceless photograph. Put the file down, she said. You knew he was here. We all knew. Why hide it? Because he is the last patient. The ward groaned around us. Mrs. Bell glanced toward the ceiling. When Apex opened, doctors believed illness could be contained in records. Name the disease. Describe the symptoms. Keep the patient under observation. And something learned to live inside the diagnosis. The lights pulsed. It needs one active patient, she continued. One unfinished case. Arthur keeps it confined to Ward E. What happens if I discharge him? It finds another patient. My hand tightened around the stamp. The doctors were dragging Marcus back toward room 9. Jim lay unconscious on a bed that had not existed seconds earlier. Arthur looked at me. Please, he said. I thought of Leah at home, 7 months pregnant. I imagined my name appearing in the hospital system, my life reduced to notes written by something that would never allow recovery. Then I saw Arthur's family waiting in the corridor. Not illusions. Memories. They had aged and died while he remained trapped in treatment. I stamped the chart. Discharged. The sound that followed was not a scream. It was a breath released after 50 years. Arthur's restraints opened. His body became lighter, his edges fading into the dim room. He looked toward his wife and son. They held out their hands. He stood for the first time since 1974. Thank you, he said. Then all three disappeared. The ward convulsed. Doctors collapsed into empty coats. Beds overturned. Medical charts erupted from the walls in a cyclone of paper. Mrs. Bell grabbed my arm. Now it needs a patient. A printer began running at the nurse's station. A fresh admission form slid onto the floor. Patient, Leah Mercer. Reason for admission, pregnancy complications. I felt the world narrow. That's my wife. The ward whispered her name. I seized the form and tore it apart. Another printed. Then another. The walls filled with the sound of unborn children crying. Marcus reached the fire alarm. He pulled it. Sprinklers released black water that smelled of river mud. Ceiling tiles collapsed, revealing rusted pipes and rotting wood. The demolished ward began returning to its real condition. We carried Jim toward the exit as walls crumbled behind us. Mrs. Bell remained at the desk. A hospital always has patients, she called after us. You can't discharge everyone. The blue doors reappeared ahead. We escaped seconds before the eastern corridor collapsed. The hospital officially blamed an old structural failure. Jim recovered but resigned. Marcus left nursing school. Mrs. Bell vanished. Human Resources claimed no one by that name had ever worked at Apex. Leah gave birth safely 2 months later. Our daughter, Sophie, was healthy. For 6 years, I believed Arthur's discharge had ended it. Then Sophie developed a fever last winter. We took her to a neighborhood clinic. The doctor said it was viral and sent us home. That night, I logged into the patient portal to check her test results. A second record appeared beneath hers. Patient, Daniel Mercer. Date admitted, March 14th, 1974. Status, in treatment. Room, E9. At the bottom of the page, someone had added a note in fresh black ink. The patient continues to believe he escaped. Story 2. The village was not on our map, but its church bell had been ringing beneath the mountain for 3 days. By the time we found the road leading into it, one member of our search team had already vanished, and the missing hiker had begun answering our radio from somewhere underground. My name is Owen Carter. I was 39 then, and I worked as a firefighter in western Colorado. I had also volunteered with County Search and Rescue for 9 years, mostly handling navigation and rope systems in steep terrain. The missing man was Marcus Hale, a 32-year-old experienced climber who had failed to return from a solo route near Black Elk Ridge. His last satellite message said he had found an old settlement in the valley and planned to shelter there from an approaching storm. There was no settlement in that valley. Our team leader, Dana Ruiz, was a practical woman with a scar across her chin and no patience for speculation. With us were Ben Keller, a geologist from the County Survey Office, and Professor Evelyn Shaw, a local historian who had studied abandoned mining sites in the region. "You are bringing a historian on a rescue?" I asked Dana. "Marcus mentioned buildings," she said. "Evelyn knows every known ruin within 50 miles. Evelyn gave me a thin smile. Apparently not everyone. We entered the backcountry before dawn. Freezing mist clung to the pines, and the ground had hardened beneath a crust of old snow. Our boots scraped over black rock while wind moved through the branches with a low, restless hiss. For the first 6 miles, our GPS units worked normally. Then every screen went blank at once. Ben tapped his device. "Battery is full." Dana checked her radio. "Base, this is Team 1. Only static answered." A bell rang somewhere ahead. One slow note. It rolled through the valley with enough force to vibrate in my chest. "There is no church out here," Evelyn said. The bell rang again. We followed Marcus's boot prints down a narrow ravine. They ended at a wall of moss-covered stone. Ben brushed aside the moss. "This is cut masonry." A seam appeared beneath his hand. Dana and I pulled at it until a section of rock shifted inward, releasing a breath of air so cold it smelled like wet iron. Behind it was a road. It descended between sheer cliffs into thick, white mist. "No road shows on the survey maps," Ben said. Dana looked at Marcus's tracks continuing downhill. "We are not here to explain it. We are here to find him." The road took us into a hidden valley surrounded by cliffs too steep to climb. At its center stood a village of dark stone houses with steep roofs and narrow windows. Moss covered the walls. Lanterns burned beside every doorway. No smoke rose from the chimneys. No people moved in the streets. The church bell rang again, though there was no church anywhere in sight. We entered the first house. A bowl of stew sat on the table. Steam still rose from it. For chairs had been pulled back as though the occupants had just stood up. Evelyn touched the bowl. Warm. Ben inspected the fireplace. No fire. On the wall hung a faded photograph of miners standing beside a wooden sign. Mercy Vale, 1911. Evelyn went pale. "I know that name." "You said there was no settlement here," Dana replied. "There was a mining camp called Mercy Vale. It disappeared after a collapse in 1913. Disappeared how? The company sent investigators. They found the mine entrance, tools, wagons, everything except the buildings and the people. A whisper came through my radio. "Owen, it was Marcus." I lifted the handset. "Marcus, identify your location." "I am beneath the hospital." Dana looked at me. "What hospital?" Marcus answered before I could ask. "The one under the church." The signal vanished. We searched the village square and found fresh footprints crossing the frost. Marcus's boots. Beside them were dozens of smaller prints made by bare feet. They led to an empty patch of ground. Then a stone building appeared there. None of us saw it arrive. One moment the square was open. The next, a narrow hospital stood before us with light glowing behind frosted windows. Ben whispered, "That was not there." Dana raised her radio. "Stay together." Inside, the corridor smelled of carbolic soap and damp stone. Iron beds lined both walls. The blankets were neatly folded, but shallow depressions marked every mattress. Evelyn found a patient ledger on a desk. The last entry was dated November 3rd, 1913. The next page was dated that morning. Marcus Hale condition. Unwilling TO remained below his name or ours. Dana Ruiz. Owen Carter. Ben Keller. Evelyn Shaw. A fifth name appeared beneath them. Caleb Ruiz. Dana took the book. "That is my brother." I knew Caleb had disappeared during a rescue 12 years earlier. Dana had never spoken about it. A voice called from the end of the corridor. "Dana." She moved before I could stop her. A man stood beneath a flickering lamp. He wore an old search and rescue jacket, though the design had been discontinued years earlier. His face was young, but frost covered his eyelashes. "Caleb," Dana whispered. He smiled. "You finally found me." Evelyn caught Dana's arm. "Ask him something." Dana stared at him. "What did you call me when we were children?" His smile held. "Sister." Dana stepped back. Caleb had called her Rooster. I remembered hearing it at a memorial service. The lights went out. When they returned, the corridor had changed. The walls curved inward, and doors covered the ceiling. Beds now stood upright against the walls. Somewhere beneath us, the bell rang so loudly dust fell from the stone. Ben ran toward the entrance. He opened the door and stepped through. A second later, he entered from the opposite end of the corridor. He stopped, confused. I went outside. "No," Evelyn said. "You went farther in." The false Caleb turned toward us. His skin rippled like a reflection disturbed by water. Then every empty bed began whispering. "Stay. Rest. You have been searching long enough." Dana drew her knife. "Where is Marcus?" The thing wearing Caleb pointed downward. The floor opened. Stone steps descended beneath the hospital into a vast cavern glowing with rows of lanterns. Buildings spread below us in impossible layers. Houses beneath streets, streets climbing walls, windows opening into solid rock. The missing village had not vanished. It had folded underground. We descended because Marcus was still calling over the radio. His voice led us to a circular chamber beneath the bell. He was tied to a wooden chair in the center. Around him stood figures dressed as miners, nurses, children, and rescue workers from different decades. None of them blinked. Marcus looked exhausted but alive. "Do not speak to them," he said. "They keep anyone who answers." The bell above us began moving. There was no rope. Each swing changed the chamber. For 1 second, we stood in the village square under summer sunlight. Then in a collapsed mine. Then inside a modern emergency room. The place was trying different versions of reality until one trapped us. A woman in a nurse's uniform approached Dana. "You came for your brother," she said. Dana raised her knife. "I came for Marcus." The nurse smiled. "That is not what the valley remembers." Caleb appeared beside her. This time his face was older, exactly as he might have looked now. "Dana, please." She nearly went to him. I grabbed the ledger from her pack and tore out the page containing our names. The figures screamed. Not with mouths. The sound came through the stone itself. The lanterns flickered, and every building below shifted position. Evelyn pointed toward the bell supports. "The town is anchored to the record." Ben understood first. He struck the ledger with his rock hammer while I pulled Marcus free. The false villagers rushed toward us. Their bodies stretched as the chamber changed, arms lengthening through walls, faces appearing in doorways that had not existed a moment earlier. Dana stood between them and Marcus. Caleb reached her. For 1 second, I thought she would let him take her. Then she whispered, "My brother hated the cold." She drove her knife into his chest. He collapsed into a pile of wet mining clothes. Ben split the ledger's spine. The bell cracked. The cavern folded. Streets slid into walls. Houses collapsed upward. Lanterns rose like falling stars. We ran. The stairway changed twice beneath our feet, but Evelyn kept shouting directions from an old mining diagram she had found in the hospital. We reached the stone road as the valley vanished into mist. The hidden entrance slammed shut behind us. Our radios started working immediately. Base camp said we had been missing for 9 days. To us, less than 7 hours had passed. Marcus survived, though he refused to discuss Mercy Vale. Ben's GPS contained no route data. Evelyn's photographs showed only fog. Dana resigned from search and rescue 2 weeks later. She told me she had finally accepted that Caleb was dead. I believed her until last month, when she mailed me a photograph with no return address. It showed the 4 of us standing in Mercy Vale's village square. Behind us, the windows were crowded with faces. One of them was Dana, and beside her stood the thing wearing my face, waiting for the next search team to arrive. Story 3. The first scream came from our own radio, in my voice, begging the team not to follow me. At that moment, I was standing beside them. My name is Aaron Vale. I was 41 years old when this happened, and I had spent 12 years as a volunteer search and rescue team leader in northern British Columbia. I worked full-time repairing power lines, but wilderness rescue had become the part of my life that mattered most. My younger brother had died alone after a climbing accident when I was 19. Ever since then, I had believed that nobody should disappear without someone going after them. That belief nearly killed all of us. We were searching for Nathan Cole, a 27-year-old wildlife photographer who had failed to return from a remote valley below Mount Alder. His emergency beacon had activated during a storm, then stopped transmitting after 11 minutes. My team included Mara Singh, an experienced dog handler with a black shepherd named Flint, Luke Bennett, a nervous rookie on his second field mission, and Elias Ward, a local tracker who had hunted that region for more than 30 years. Our helicopter pilot, Helen Ross, had dropped us near the western ridge before the weather closed in. 6 hours, Helen said through her headset. After that, the fog will trap me outside the valley. We will be waiting, I told her. Elias looked toward the trees. You should not promise that here. I assumed he meant the weather. The forest was soaked from 3 days of rain. Water dripped steadily from cedar branches, and mud pulled at our boots. The air smelled of rotting wood, wet stone, and something sour beneath the soil. Fog pressed between the trunks in pale layers, reducing the world to a circle around our headlamps. Flint found Nathan's trail within 20 minutes. At first, the signs were ordinary. A broken fern, mud scraped from a rock, a partial boot print beside a creek. Then Flint stopped. His ears flattened. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Mara crouched beside him. What is it? Flint backed away from the trail. I had never seen a trained search dog refuse a fresh scent. Elias examined a nearby cedar. 3 long marks had been carved through the bark, high above my head. There? Luke asked. Elias shook his head. Too clean. The marks appeared on the next tree, then the next, always at the same height. They were not following Nathan's path. They were following ours. At midday, we found his campsite beneath an overhang. His tent had collapsed, but his camera and food remained dry inside. A small fire had recently burned out. Mara touched the ashes. Still warm. Luke looked around. Then he is close. A radio crackled from inside the tent. Nathan's emergency handset lay beneath his sleeping bag. His voice came through it. Please help me. I picked it up. Nathan, this is search and rescue. Can you hear me? I can see your lights. It was daylight. What lights? A pause followed. Then he whispered, the ones moving behind you. We turned together. Nothing stood between the trees. Flint began barking at the empty forest. The radio spoke again. Do not let it hear your name. The signal died. Mara stared at the handset. That radio has no battery. I opened the compartment. It was empty. We should have left then, but Nathan was alive somewhere ahead. I could not abandon him based on something I could not explain. We continued deeper. The forest grew darker despite the afternoon hour. The fog thickened, and the trees stood so close that our packs scraped against wet bark. No birds called. No insects moved. Even the rain seemed to stop before touching the ground. Then I heard Helen over my radio. Aaron, I have Nathan. Return to the landing site. I answered immediately. Confirm your location. Western Ridge. Her voice sounded clear, but something was wrong. Helen never called me Aaron during operations. She always used Vale. Give me the authentication phrase, I said. Static hissed. Then Helen answered in a child's voice. Your brother waited for you. My hands went numb. Luke stepped backward. What did it say? Before I could answer, a scream tore through the forest. It sounded like Mara. She was standing beside me. Another scream followed from farther away, then another, each one in her exact voice. Flint pulled free of her grip and charged into the fog. Flint, Mara ran after him. I caught her pack. Do not separate. We followed the dogs barking through dense brush until it stopped abruptly. We found Flint's tracking vest hanging from a branch. There was no blood. No paw prints. Only a shallow depression in the mud, long and narrow, as though something had dragged its body beneath the ground. Mara sank to her knees. He would not leave me. Elias raised one hand for silence. Something moved below us. The soil rose in a slow line, traveling between the roots like a large animal swimming beneath water. It circled us once. Then Luke's radio spoke in his mother's voice. Lucas, come home. Luke froze. She is dead, he whispered. The ground split behind him. A black shape unfolded from the mud. It had no fixed body. It rose as a column of wet darkness filled with roots, bones, strips of old clothing, and pale surfaces that resembled unfinished faces. Voices moved through it, overlapping and rearranging themselves. Flint barked from inside the thing. Mara rushed forward. Elias pulled her back as a root-like limb struck the ground where she had been standing. Run, I shouted. We fled toward the ridge. The creature traveled beneath us, breaking the surface in bursts. Each time it rose, it wore a different outline. Nathan. Helen. Flint. My dead brother. It knew which shape would make us hesitate. Luke fell when the ground opened under his foot. I grabbed his harness and pulled while hands formed from the mud around his ankle. They spoke in my voice. Let him go. I drove my rescue axe into the nearest wrist. It split like soaked wood and released a cloud of cold vapor. The forest screamed. We reached a clearing as darkness fell. Nathan stood in the center beside his emergency beacon. He appeared exhausted, soaked, and terrified. You found me, he said. Mara started toward him. Elias blocked her. Look at his feet. Nathan stood barefoot in freezing mud. The surface beneath him remained perfectly smooth. I called out, Where is your camera? In my pack. We had found it at the campsite. The false Nathan smiled. Behind us, the real Nathan's voice whispered from my radio. I am under the beacon. The ground erupted. The creature rose around the false survivor, wearing him like a face. Its body spread between the trees, taller than the canopy, made of soil, roots, and every person it had ever copied. At its center, I saw Nathan buried to his shoulders beneath the beacon, still alive. I fired a signal flare into the creature. Red light flooded the clearing. Every stolen face turned toward me. The thing recoiled, and I ran beneath it. Roots struck my shoulders and pulled at my pack. Voices shouted directions, threats, and pleas. My brother screamed that I had failed him. I reached Nathan and cut the cords wrapped around his chest. Elias and Luke dragged him free while Mara fired 2 more flares into the creature's exposed center. The ground collapsed. We ran without stopping. Helen found us on the western ridge at dawn. She landed in wind that should have made landing impossible. Nathan survived. Luke resigned from search and rescue. Mara never found Flint. Officials blamed our experience on exhaustion, unstable terrain, and exposure. The recordings from our radios contained only static. 3 months later, Mara called me. She said Flint had returned to her house during a storm. He looked healthy. He remembered every command. The only problem was that he had begun speaking in my dead brother's voice whenever she turned off the lights. Last week, she disappeared. Her front door was open, and muddy footprints led from her bedroom into the forest. They belonged to a dog walking upright. My radio has been silent since that rescue, but every night at midnight, the dead screen lights up and displays one message. Aaron, we found Mara, and now she knows your voice. Story 4. The search officially ended 11 years ago. I know that because every night, at exactly 2 minutes past midnight, the radio tells me so. My name is Nathan Cole. I was 46 years old when the operation began, and I had worked as a ranger in Black Pine National Park for nearly 18 years. I knew the northern forest better than I knew the streets of my hometown. I knew where the old logging roads disappeared beneath moss, where the ground froze first, and which valleys held fog long after sunrise. None of that knowledge helped me find 8-year-old Emily Ward. She vanished during a family camping trip after walking less than 50 yards from her parents' tent. Her father, Daniel, said she had gone to collect pine cones before dinner. When she did not return, he searched for 30 minutes before calling for help. By sunset, snow had begun falling. My team entered the forest just before dark. With me were Leah Morgan, a wilderness medic with a calm voice and a habit of humming when she was worried. Peter Shaw, a young volunteer on his first winter search, and Rosa Delgado, a dog handler whose bloodhound, Cooper, had found 3 missing hikers that year. Daniel insisted on joining us. "I am not staying at the command post while my daughter is out there," he said. I told him the terrain was dangerous and the temperature would fall below freezing. He looked at me with red, exhausted eyes. "Then you understand why I am coming." We followed Emily's scent north from the campground. At first, everything made sense. Cooper pulled hard against his harness. Small boot prints crossed the fresh snow, leading between spruce trees. A pink mitten lay beside a fallen log. Then the track stopped. There was no cliff, stream, or exposed rock. The prints simply ended in the middle of a flat clearing. Cooper circled the spot, whining. Rosa knelt and let him smell the mitten again. "Find Emily." The dog returned to the same place and sat down. Peter checked his navigation unit. "It says the campground is 100 yards east." I looked behind us. We had walked nearly 2 miles. "My unit says the same thing," Leah said. Daniel pointed into the trees. "Emily," a child answered from far ahead. "Daddy." He ran before I could stop him. We followed through deepening snow until our headlamps found a small campsite beneath a stone ledge. A fire burned in the center. 5 bedrolls surrounded it. One of them belonged to me. I recognized the torn strap and the black repair tape I had placed along the edge that morning. My metal cup rested beside it, filled with warm coffee. Peter stared at his own pack lying near the fire. "How did this get here?" Rosa checked her shoulders. Her pack was still on her back. So was mine. The duplicate equipment looked identical, down to the scratches and mud stains. Leah touched the coffee. "It is hot." Daniel searched the empty bedrolls. Emily is not here. A radio placed beside the fire crackled. My voice came through it. Command, this is Team 1. We found the child. We are returning now. I had not made that transmission. I lifted my own handset. Command, disregard that message. We have not located Emily. Static answered. Then another voice repeated from the radio by the fire. Disregard that message. It sounded exactly like me, but slower, as though something was learning how I spoke. We left the campsite immediately. I marked a tree with orange tape before we moved north. 20 minutes later, we entered the same clearing from the opposite direction. The fire still burned. Our duplicate equipment had changed. The bedrolls were open now. Each one held a shallow shape beneath the blankets, like sleeping bodies. Peter backed away. We walked in a straight line. No, Rosa said quietly. Cooper brought us here. The dog stood at the edge of the firelight, staring into the trees. A little girl was visible between the trunks. She wore a yellow coat and red boots. Emily, Daniel whispered. She turned and ran. We chased her. The forest seemed to stretch around us. Trees passed in repeating patterns. Split trunk, white stone, dead branch shaped like a hand. I saw them again and again. The snow never deepened, though it continued falling. We followed the child for hours without getting closer. Every time my light touched her coat, she appeared the same distance ahead. Leah checked her watch. It is almost sunrise. The sky remained black. Peter laughed once, sharply. My watch says midnight. Mine did too. The radio came alive with endless voices. Search teams reported from every direction. Some requested medical support. Others announced they had found Emily. One voice identified itself as mine and described our position perfectly. Another transmission came from Rosa. Cooper is gone. She was standing beside me, gripping his leash. The dog began growling at her. Rosa froze. Why is he looking at me like that? The radio repeated her voice. Cooper knows. The dog pulled away and barked toward a line of trees. A second Rosa stepped from the darkness. She wore the same coat, carried the same equipment, and held an identical leash. The second Cooper walked beside her. Daniel screamed. Both Rosas raised their hands. The one beside me said, Nathan, do not listen to her. The one beneath the trees said, You already lost Peter. I turned. Peter was gone. No footprints led away from where he had been standing. I called his name until my throat hurt. His voice answered from the radio. I am at the campsite. We returned because there was nowhere else to go. The fire had gone out. Peter sat beside the ashes with Emily on his lap. She looked pale but unharmed. Daniel rushed toward her. I blocked him. Emily, what did you collect before dinner? Pine cones. What color was your mitten? Pink. Daniel shoved past me and embraced her. For a moment, I believed we had found her. Then Emily looked over his shoulder at me. Her face remained still, but her voice came through my radio. This is the part where you take me home. The child in Daniel's arms smiled. Behind her, the forest disappeared. In its place stood the command post beneath bright daylight. Search vehicles lined the road. People waved us forward. Leah began crying with relief. I almost followed. Then I noticed the vehicles had no tracks in the snow. The figures near the tents were motionless. One of them was me. The other Nathan stood beside a map table, watching us. I understood then that the forest was not trapping our bodies. It was repeating the rescue, making copies until one version of us accepted the wrong ending. I grabbed Emily and pulled her away from Daniel. She screamed with several voices at once. The daylight scene flickered. The command post became trees again. The thing wearing Emily twisted in my arms. Its face shifted through Peter, Rosa, Leah, Daniel, and finally me. Beneath those faces was only a dark opening filled with falling snow. Cooper lunged and tore into its coat. The creature collapsed inward, dragging the dog with it. Rosa seized his leash, but it slipped through her hands. The ground closed. Cooper vanished. Somewhere far away, a child screamed. The real Emily. We followed her voice to a narrow hollow beneath the roots of an uprooted tree. She was alive, wrapped in leaves and barely conscious. When I lifted her, the forest began to change. Trees moved behind us. Trails folded into one another. Duplicate searchers appeared between the trunks, carrying other Emilys toward false command posts. We ran toward the sound of helicopter blades. The noise stayed directly overhead, but no aircraft appeared. Leah disappeared first. She was holding my shoulder, and then her hand was gone. Rosa vanished beside the marked tree. Daniel faded while carrying Emily, leaving the child suspended for one terrible second before I caught her. I reached the campground alone. It was abandoned. The tents had rotted into the earth. Trees grew through the picnic tables. The ranger station windows were broken. Inside, I found a newspaper dated 11 years after the search began. The headline said Emily Ward had never been found. My photograph appeared beneath hers. I was listed among the missing rescuers. The radio on the desk activated. A dispatcher said the search had been suspended due to weather. Then she repeated the same message. Then she repeated it again. I carried Emily back into the woods because she was still breathing, and because somewhere beyond the trees I could hear Daniel calling for her. I have been searching ever since. Sometimes Emily is 8 years old. Sometimes she is grown. Sometimes she remembers me. Sometimes she asks why I never took her home. The snow never stops. The sun never rises. Every trail returns to the same dead fire. Tonight, my radio says a new rescue team has entered the northern forest. I can hear them calling my name. I am trying to warn them, but the voice answering through their radios is already using mine. Story 5. The missing woman watched us search for her for 2 days before she finally spoke. She stood between the trees each night, just beyond the reach of our lights, and whenever we moved toward her, she smiled and disappeared deeper into the forest. My name is Michael Trent. I was 38 years old when I joined the search for Evelyn Moore in Greywater Wilderness Reserve. I worked as a county maintenance supervisor, but I had volunteered with search and rescue for 7 years. I knew how panic changed people. I also knew what it felt like to be lost. When I was 9, I disappeared for 3 days in a forest outside my hometown. I remembered almost nothing about that time except a voice telling me that my parents had stopped looking. They had not. A ranger found me sleeping beneath a cedar tree. That childhood experience was why I joined the team. Evelyn was 29, a wildlife illustrator, and the daughter of our local physician. She had entered Greywater alone to sketch migratory birds. Her vehicle was found at the eastern trailhead. The driver door was unlocked, and her boots were gone, but her telephone, wallet, and car keys remained inside. Our team leader was Ranger Helen Cross, a direct, practical woman who had spent most of her life in those woods. Evelyn's husband, Mark, insisted on joining us. Her best friend, Rachel Kim, came as well because she knew Evelyn's habits and favorite hiking routes. A local elder named Samuel Pike agreed to guide us through the northern wetlands. Samuel was nearly 70 and moved slowly, but he noticed things the rest of us missed. At the trailhead, he studied the forest and said, "She did not get lost." Mark turned toward him. "Then where is she?" Samuel looked at the mist gathering between the trees. Somewhere she meant to go. The forest was unnaturally quiet. The earth smelled of wet leaves, mushrooms, and stagnant water. Mist drifted close to the ground, sliding around roots like pale smoke. Our boots sank into dark soil that released small bubbles when we stepped. We found Evelyn's first campsite before noon. Her tent was still standing. A cooking pot sat above cold ashes. Her sleeping bag was dry, and her pack contained enough food for 4 more days. Rachel searched the tent. She would never leave this behind. Helen found a notebook beneath the sleeping bag. The first entries described birds, weather, and trail conditions. The later pages changed. It knows which paths I remember. I hear people walking around the tent, but they stop when I look outside. The trees are closer every morning. The last sentence had been written repeatedly across 2 pages. I am almost where they want me. Mark closed the notebook. She was frightened. Samuel shook his head. No. Look at the handwriting. The letters were careful and steady. Evelyn had not been panicking. She had been recording progress. We continued north. Her footprints were easy to follow at first. Then they divided. One trail moved east, another west, and a third continued straight ahead. All 3 sets belonged to the same boots. Helen crouched beside them. She walked through here once. Rachel looked at the separate trails. Then how did she make 3 paths? Samuel touched the mud. These are not tracks. They are instructions. We followed the center trail. That evening, we made camp near a shallow stream. The mist thickened after sunset, swallowing the trees beyond our lanterns. No insects buzzed near the water. No owls called. I woke sometime after midnight to soft footsteps circling the tents. I reached for my flashlight. The footsteps stopped. Then Evelyn whispered from outside. Michael. I had never met her. I stepped from my tent and saw a woman standing between 2 cedars. She wore a green jacket and carried no equipment. Her bare feet were dark with mud. Evelyn. She smiled. Do you remember what found you when you were 9? My chest tightened. What did you say? She turned and walked into the mist. I followed 3 steps before Helen grabbed my shoulder. Where are you going? She was there. Helen raised her light. The trees were empty. Around our camp, fresh barefoot prints formed a complete circle. They did not lead toward us or away. At dawn, Mark found one of Evelyn's gloves hanging from a branch. Beneath it, someone had carved his name into the bark. The next tree carried Rachel's name. The next carried mine. Samuel's name was not there. He stared at the carvings and said, "We should leave." Mark faced him. "My wife is alive." "Yes." "Then we keep searching." Samuel looked toward the deeper forest. "She is not the one in danger now." Helen called for helicopter support, but our radios produced only a low murmur. It sounded like many people whispering from far underground. We moved toward higher ground. The landscape began repeating. We passed the same split cedar 3 times. The same white bird feather lay on 3 different rocks. Each time I checked my compass, north pointed behind us. Rachel began hearing Evelyn's voice. "She says she found something beautiful," Rachel whispered. Mark grabbed her arm. "Where?" Rachel pointed into the trees. A figure stood there. Evelyn raised one hand and motioned for us to follow. Mark ran toward her. We chased him down a slope into a wide clearing filled with abandoned campsites. There were dozens of tents, most rotted and collapsed. Rusted cooking equipment lay beneath moss. Jackets hung from branches. Some belonged to hikers who had disappeared decades earlier. At the center stood Evelyn. She looked healthy. Her hair was clean. Her face was calm. Fine pale roots curled around her ankles and disappeared beneath her skin. Mark stopped several feet from her. "We came to take you home." Evelyn's smile faded. "I do not have a home there anymore." Rachel began crying. "Your family is waiting." "I know." "Then come with us." Evelyn looked beyond us. "They are not waiting for me. They are waiting for the person I was." The ground shifted beneath my boots. Thin roots moved through the soil like veins. Helen raised her radio. "Evelyn, step away from the trees." Evelyn laughed softly. "The trees are not holding me." Samuel arrived behind us, breathing heavily. He looked at the surrounding camps and closed his eyes. "My brother vanished here," he said. 46 years ago, a young man stepped from one of the ruined tents. He had Samuel's eyes. Samuel whispered his brother's name. The man smiled and extended a hand. Evelyn said. It remembers everyone who chooses to stay. The forest moved, not the branches. The trunks themselves leaned closer. Faces appeared in the bark, not carved, but pressing outward from inside the wood. Their eyes remained closed. Their mouths whispered names. Mark rushed forward and seized Evelyn's wrist. The roots beneath her skin tightened. She screamed. The sound came from every tree. The ground opened in narrow lines around us, and pale hands formed from woven roots. One caught Rachel's ankle. Another closed around Helen's boot. I cut at them with my rescue knife, while Samuel pulled Rachel free. Evelyn struck Mark across the face. Stop trying to save me. He stared at her. You are sick. No, I was sick before. Her eyes filled with tears. I spent my whole life feeling something calling me. I thought it was fear. It was memory. She looked at me. You heard it too. The childhood voice returned inside my head. Your parents stopped looking. For the first time, I remembered what came after. I had answered, then I will stay. Something beneath the clearing recognized me. The soil rose around my boots. Warmth traveled up my legs, carrying a sense of peace so deep that I nearly let myself sink. I saw my childhood self sleeping beneath the cedar. Fine roots rested against my face. Helen slapped me. Michael moved. I tore my feet free. The forest shuddered. Evelyn stepped backward as the roots climbed higher around her body. You should go now, she said. Mark reached for her again. She shook her head. You are not rescuing me. You are introducing yourselves. Figures emerged from the ruined tents. Missing hikers, children, hunters. Some looked unchanged. Others moved stiffly, with bark splitting their skin and small leaves growing from their mouths. They surrounded us without making a sound. Samuel grabbed Mark. Run. We fled. The forest tried to divide us. Trails opened beneath our feet and closed behind us. Familiar voices called from the mist. My mother begged me to stop. My childhood self cried from beneath the roots. We reached the eastern trailhead shortly before dawn. Samuel did not come out with us. Neither did Rachel. Mark tried to return, but Helen restrained him until the helicopter arrived. The official search continued for another week. No trace of the campsites was found. Satellite images showed uninterrupted forest. Mark never accepted that Evelyn stayed willingly. I did not either, at first. Then parcels began arriving at my house. Each contained a page from Evelyn's notebook. The newest page arrived yesterday. The writing was not hers. It was mine. I do not remember writing the sentence, but I recognized every curve of the letters. It said that Evelyn had not joined the forest at all. She had only been waiting inside it until I was old enough to come back. Last night, roots began growing through the floor beneath my bed, and this morning they were whispering that the search team is finally complete. Story 6. The rescue call came from a man who used my voice, knew the name of my daughter, and begged us not to reach him before midnight. At the time, I believed somebody had intercepted our emergency frequency. 3 days later, I learned that the caller was me. My name is David Mercer. I was 44 years old when this happened, and I had led volunteer mountain rescue teams in Olympic National Park for nearly 13 years. I worked as an emergency dispatcher during the week, which meant I knew how fear changed a voice. I could usually tell the difference between panic, confusion, injury, and deception. The call that began the search sounded like all four. A man reported that he had fallen into a ravine north of Grey Wolf Ridge. He said his leg was broken and his companion was missing. The signal cut in and out beneath heavy static, but the coordinates repeated clearly. The problem was that the coordinates changed every time he gave them. Our team included Jonah Reed, a rookie with strong climbing skills and more confidence than experience, Ruth Calder, a veteran tracker nearing retirement, and Elena Park, a park ranger who knew the northern valleys. Peter Lane, Our helicopter pilot planned to place us near the first coordinates before the weather worsened. As we loaded our equipment, our communications officer called me aside. "The caller asked for you by name," Maya said. "Did he explain why?" "No. He also said Sophie is still afraid of thunderstorms." Sophie was my 12-year-old daughter. Nobody on the team knew that. Rain struck the helicopter windows as we crossed the mountains. Below us, black pine forest disappeared beneath rolling fog. The clouds hung so low that Peter had to follow the contours of the valleys. When we reached the coordinates, the navigation screen showed open terrain. Below us stood an unbroken wall of trees. "I cannot land there," Peter said. Elena studied her map. "There should be a meadow." Ruth leaned toward the window. There was one. A circle of dead grass appeared briefly through the fog, then vanished behind trees that seemed to close over it. Peter placed us on a rocky slope half a mile west. The cold entered my gloves immediately. Freezing rain clicked against our helmets, and wet branches brushed our shoulders as we descended. The forest smelled of pine resin, mud, and stone. We found a rescue ribbon tied around the first tree. It was bright orange and printed with our county identification. Jonah touched it. "Did another team enter before us?" "No," I said. "The knot was mine." I always folded the loose end twice before securing it. It was a habit Ruth had mocked for years. She looked at me without smiling. "You tied that?" I did not. Farther down the slope, we found another ribbon. Then another. They marked a route directly toward the ravine. The radio crackled. "Team Leader Mercer, you are going the wrong way." The caller sounded exhausted. I raised the handset. "Identify yourself." "You already know." "What is your name?" A wet breath passed through the speaker. "David." Jonah looked at me. The voice continued. "Do not let Ruth see the campsite." Ruth stared toward the trees. "Why did it say my name?" The transmission ended. We found the campsite 10 minutes later. A small tent stood beneath a cedar. A stove still burned. 4 metal cups rested around it, each filled with warm tea. One cup had Ruth's initials scratched into the side. She dropped it. I lost that cup during a search in 1998. Inside the tent, we found equipment from different decades. Old canvas packs, modern climbing ropes, park uniforms no longer in use, a cracked helmet bearing the name of a rescuer who had disappeared before I joined the service. Elena uncovered a notebook. Every page contained the same distress call written in different handwriting. "Broken leg. Companion missing. Gray Wolf Ridge." The dates stretched back 70 years. Jonah whispered. Every team came for the same person. A scream echoed from the ravine. It sounded human and close. We moved because that was what we had been trained to do. The ground became steeper, slick with needles and black water. Our navigation units showed the victim 1 mile ahead. After an hour, they still showed 1 mile. The map on Elena's screen changed as we watched. A trail appeared, curved around our position, and erased itself. Peter called from the helicopter. "I have your signal, but I cannot see you. We are beneath the eastern ridge." "No, you are not. Your beacon is circling the mountain. We are standing still." "So am I." Above us, helicopter blades passed through the fog. Peter's voice came from the sky and the radio at the same time. Neither sound moved away. At dusk, Jonah disappeared. He had been 10 feet behind me. I heard him slip, turned, and found only his pack resting upright against a tree. His radio transmitted from inside it. "David, I found the victim." Jonah's voice sounded calm. "Where are you?" "At the coordinates." "Which coordinates?" "The ones you will send." Ruth switched off the radio. "We leave now." Elena pointed through the trees. A line of orange ribbons led back uphill. We followed them for 2 hours and returned to the same campsite. The tea was still warm. Jonah sat beside the stove. He smiled when he saw us. "Where were you?" Ruth drew her knife. Jonah's smile weakened. I found the man in the ravine. What man? I asked. You. He pointed toward the fog. A red light blinked below us. An emergency beacon. We descended toward it. The ravine had not existed earlier. It cut through the forest like a fresh wound, its sides dropping into darkness. The beacon flashed from a narrow ledge 50 feet below. A man lay beside it. He wore my jacket. His hair was gray, and his face looked 20 years older than mine, but I recognized the scar beneath his chin and the wedding ring on his hand. He looked up. You came too early, he said in my voice. Ruth lowered herself beside me. Who are you? The older man ignored her. He looked directly at me. You have to make the call. I did not call anyone. Not yet. The fog above the ravine filled with voices. Some belonged to Jonah. Others belonged to rescuers whose equipment waited at the campsite. They repeated coordinates, names, injuries, and pleas for help. The older version of me pointed toward the beacon. It only opens when someone answers. Every rescue brings it farther out. What opens? He looked down. The ravine moved. Its walls were not stone. They were packed with clothing, radios, ropes, and pale human shapes pressed together beneath the mud. Their mouths opened whenever the emergency frequency crackled. Ruth stepped back. The false Jonah seized Elena. His face softened like wet clay, changing through strangers and missing rescuers. I struck him with my climbing bar. His body split into strips of fog that rushed toward the ravine. The ground shook. The older man grabbed my wrist. You must call your own team. That is how you survive long enough to warn yourself. I will not send them here. You already did. He pressed the radio into my hand. Its display showed a date 18 years in the future. I heard Sophie crying through the speaker. She was grown, calling me from somewhere inside the ravine. Dad, please answer. I nearly spoke. Ruth slapped the radio away. That is not your daughter. The ravine opened wider. Hands formed from discarded rescue gloves and reached toward us. Elena cut herself free while Ruth fired a flare into the mass below. Red fire spread across the trapped equipment. The voices screamed. The older man looked relieved. Then the ledge collapsed beneath him. I caught his hand. For 1 second, I held my future self above the darkness. He whispered, "You will make the call when they take Sophie." His fingers slipped from mine. The ravine closed around him. We ran uphill as the forest rearranged itself. Ribbons appeared before us faster than we could follow them. Peter's helicopter finally broke through the fog at dawn and found us standing in the meadow that had not existed the day before. Jonah was never found. The official recording of the original distress call contained no identifiable speaker. The coordinates led to several different places depending on when the file was played. Sophie is 30 now. She moved away years ago and rarely speaks to me. Last night, my emergency radio activated inside a locked cabinet. Her voice came through first. She was crying. Then my own older voice gave the coordinates to Grey Wolf Ridge and said, "Send David Mercer, because he is the only one who still believes this is a rescue." I have not answered yet, but outside my window, orange ribbons are appearing on the trees, and every knot has been tied by my hand.